evening. Let's start by standing and singing song number 306. 306, Complete in Thee. 306. We'll stand and sing.
Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the day. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight as a church together. And Lord, I pray now that you would bless the teaching for your word tonight. And Lord, also the kids' class in the back and the prayer time. Lord, I pray that you would just draw us closer to you through it. And we'll thank you for it. It's in Jesus' name we pray.
Amen. All right, you may be seated. If you still have your place, it's right across the page 305. 305, Deeper and Deeper, song number 305.
Why he should stoop to lift me right, welcome to Faith Baptist Church on this first Wednesday of March. Hope you had a good first part of the week. How about somebody with something they'd like to thank the Lord for tonight? Okay, Micah.
I was thankful for some really beautiful weather, that the wind was tolerable while we were setting trusses.
All right, thank the Lord for some beautiful weather for sure. All right, Lila. Okay, thank the Lord you got to go skiing. All right.
Hey, Rick. I'm also thankful for skiing this season, and then I'm also thankful for just a testimony and song. And so during cross-country skiing with Eagle Mount, and so it's Emily, Lila, and me, and then 2 volunteers. And it's more about like playing games and stories and jokes and all that than it is cross-country skiing, I think, for them. And I'm just thankful for, it was last week, Emmeline and Lila, but mainly Emmeline was teaching the one volunteer about the Trinity song. And so the kids are working on that in Sunday school. It's a Pastor Fire song. And it was amazing because she's teaching this volunteer about the Trinity. I mean, it told the story of the Trinity and like how amazing it is and what a mystery it is. And she was catching on. She was singing it right with Emmeline last week. And so I just hope and pray that just has that influence on these girls, these 20-year-old girls that are being able to ski with us. So it was pretty neat.
All right. Thank the Lord for just opportunities. Doesn't matter how old. And sometimes, kids, you've got an advantage. Adults will be rude to another adult, but a child, you've got a little more latitude. But thank the Lord for those opportunities. Okay, Paige?
So you had even asked on, I think it was Sunday night, like something that you're thankful for about where you live. And I didn't raise my hand because I've been so focused on finding new property for us to build a new house on. But last night we were sitting at dinner and our picture window, and I mean, we got to watch close to 75 deer just walk across the field, and it was the snow with the mountains in the background, like it was just picture perfect. And so it was a reminder to just be content and to trust God's will, and I'm thankful for that.
All right. Thank the Lord for just the uniqueness of where we all live, and just the opportunity to see things that, we probably as folks living around here, we've seen probably more bald eagles than most of the country. Just driving down the road to going places, and we can take things as simple as that for granted. Thank the Lord for just how He helps us. All righty. Well, just a few announcements, things going on that we need to be mindful of. Tomorrow evening, if you can, from 6 to 8, we'll be at the new building. Just a variety of things that we're hoping to accomplish. Some trash removal. We'll be piling some stuff in Dave's truck, some stuff in my truck, and then there's just a number of other things that we're hoping to get accomplished. And so that's tomorrow evening, 6 to 8. Saturday morning visiting at 10. Sunday school on Sunday at 10. Morning service at 11 and evening service at 6. So those things finishing out the week. If you haven't had an opportunity to have the joy in cleaning the building, there are opportunities that you say, well, Pastor, I don't know. I can show you. I'll show up here and I will walk you through the difficult task of cleaning the building so you will be an expert. But opportunities back there help us out with that. All righty. We'll have our ushers come. We'll get ready to take the offering. All right, Gareth, how about asking the Lord's blessing on the offering?
Dear Jesus, thanks for this day. Thanks for letting us take the offering today. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right, we will let the kids be dismissed. Back to King's Kids. And we're going to go to Genesis chapter 12. Let's see. Dave and Russ, if you want to distribute these. Eight and a half years ago, we looked at the geography of Israel. The more we understand the geography of Israel, the easier it is to understand, if nothing else, the amount of miles that Jesus and the disciples walked. The Sea of Galilee is about 70 miles from Jerusalem. But Jesus just didn't go to the Sea of Galilee. He went up into the land of the Phoenicians. That's another 50 miles. That's 120 miles. The bulk of it on foot. So you begin to appreciate the fact that Jesus nor the disciples were out of shape. They were constantly going up to Sea of Galilee, back to Jerusalem. Sea of Galilee, then up into the land of the Phoenicians. They covered a ton of ground. But in Genesis chapter 12, beginning at verse number 1, the Bible says, "And the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, into a land that I will show thee, and I will make thee of thee a great nation. I will bless thee, make thee thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed." The land of Israel is the only land that God specifically said, "This is yours." Nobody else, no other nation, no other group of people have been deeded land by God, but Israel was. Land of Israel, also known as Palestine in Exodus chapter 15. It's known as Canaan, the land of Canaan. And that's because the combined nations, and there were a variety of nations in this conglomeration, but they were the Canaanites that possessed the land before Israel, the Jews came in. So it's also known as the land of Canaan in Genesis 9, 11, and 17. It's also known as the Promised Land. It was the land that God promised Abraham as well as Israel. It's also known as the Holy Land. So all of these names are talking about the same area of the world. Israel is approximately 12,000 square miles. And that might sound like a lot, but it's not. It's about the size of New Hampshire. And if you can picture in your mind going up into New England and picturing New Hampshire, that's about the same land mass that Israel has. Not very big. Now we're in looking at the land of Israel, to get it tonight, we'll touch on basically the geography or the makeup of the land. How let's start on the East Coast. What kind of, if you were describing the United States to somebody that had never been here, how would you describe the eastern states, all the way up and down? What kinds of things would you use to describe it?
Lots of trees.
All right. Lots of trees indicates lots of moisture. The average fully grown maple, oak tree, many of the hardwoods drink 400 to 500 gallons of water a day. They're thirsty. There's also a ton of evaporation going on. At this, they're not just bulking up on water. But so any area that is heavily forested, and specifically with hardwoods, is going to be a land that's going to range in the 40 to 60 inches a year, and we come nowhere close to that. So that's why naturally hardwoods do not exist around here. We simply don't have the moisture. Now, there's hybrids of, we have a maple tree in our backyard. It's a hybrid. But if I didn't water the yard at all, that maple tree wouldn't live at all. There's just not enough moisture. Okay, so we've got a lot of trees. What else would how would we describe the eastern states?
Rolling hills.
Okay, for us, we would call it rolling hills. They call them mountains, despite the fact that I believe West Virginia has the highest peak east of the Mississippi, and it's around 5,000 feet. So it's equivalent to where we sit tonight. That's the highest mountain there on the East Coast. So, but yes, I mean, hill country. So then we move past the Mississippi, and we come out into what we would call what? The Great Plains. Okay, what does that mean, Dave?
Pretty much flat.
All right. A lot of flat land. What else?
Crops.
Okay. because it's flat land, it's fairly easy to irrigate, a lot easier than hill country and whatnot. So there is an abundance of crops throughout the Midwest. Then we come into what we would refer to the Rocky Mountain states. How would you describe that? Rocky. That is true. Anything else could we describe it? All right. Some of the highest elevations consistently in throughout the country, it would be found in the Rocky Mountain states. Dry. Outside of the mountains, the moisture throughout the Rocky Mountain states runs less than 25 inches a year, where this area is right in the 20-inch range. But yeah, it's pretty dry. Anything else? The best states are in the Rocky Mountains. Then we move to the west coast. How would we describe that? Okay, most of the mountain peaks, particularly in the northwest, are volcanic peaks. Anything else?
Liberal.
What? Liberal.
Desert.
Okay, on the east side of the chain of mountains, extremely dry. The west side, extremely wet. And so, but if even you and I, if we have an understanding of our own country, and you think about Bible days, travel, bulk of it by foot, you can appreciate the difficulty a little bit more when you understand what kind of terrain they're covering. So we'll look at our map, and we'll start on the west coast. The west coast is called the coastal plain, which would be all, you got the plain of Acre, plain of Sharon, and the plain of Philistia. The coastal plain is dominated by three characteristics. It's agricultural land, because again, the plains. It's also a prime trade route. So there's really two main, there's three, but for the bulk of travel, you're either coming up the east side of Jordan or up the coast. There is avenue, but for the bulk of travel, this is a very lucrative or very prime trade route. But what's the problem with a plain? Flat land, no contour, it's open for attack. If you got prime trade route, a lot of commerce, who controls the commerce makes a lot of money. And so we know this section down here, the plain of Philistia, the Philistines almost always controlled that. Though it's part of the land of Israel, they just never ran the Philistines completely out. They set them back many, many times, but then they would relax because they were dealing with either attacks from the north or from the east, and they would just ignore them, let them rebuild, and then they became a problem again. So the land was always up for attack from all sides, really, other than the west, because outside of a couple ports, this is a terrible port type. You just couldn't. There's sheer cliffs up to the Mediterranean Sea, so there's not a lot of natural ports. So the attack from the west was not as big a deal. We moved just in from the coastal plain, and we come up through this yellow section. That yellow section is called the Shephelah. The Shephelah, which is the east end of the coastal plain, became kind of a buffer zone between Israel and the Philistines primarily. And Israel didn't fight for because there's the ports. There's not a lot of ports, and so there wasn't a lot of point in capturing that. So the Shephelah is kind of like between North and South Korea. There's a buffer strip between them that is the demilitarized zone. And neither country is supposed to infiltrate that area. I don't know how well it works. Evidently, all right. But at any rate, that is what that area. Now, who controlled that area? Well, it went back and forth. Ever who was dominant at the time. If Israel was dominant, a lot of the cities that were in the Shephelah were captured by one, and then ultimately captured again by the other. It went back and forth. Ever who was dominant at the time. When the Philistines were dominant, they controlled this area. When Israel was dominant, the positive or it was good farming through this land also, but you got Jerusalem. There's a trade route that goes from Jerusalem over to the coastal routes, and the Shephelah was could shut that off if you controlled that. So you controlled a lot of the possibility of commerce. Now, this section right through here, which is at the top end of the Shephelah, it goes from Mount Carmel and comes across south of the Sea of Galilee, the Valley of Jezreel. Also, it's called the Plain of Esdraelon. The fortress city of Megiddo is at the west side of the Valley of Jezreel, and then the city of Jezreel is at this and controls this end. But this is extremely, because you got mountains to the south, mountains to the north, and this is a natural valley, natural trade route, and very fertile land as well. And so it was a land that was valuable in who controlled it. Nazareth is in this valley. Mount Carmel, obviously, is at the east end, and that's where Elijah had the contest with the prophets of Baal. So that's that section or right through here. A lot of the battles with the kings was always through this, because that was an important valley to control. As I mentioned, surrounded by the green, this section, and it includes in that Jerusalem. It includes Bethlehem, many of the biblical cities that we would recognize are in that what is called the Central Range. The Central Range. Now, they're not mountains. I mean, it's kind of like the Easterners talk about their mountains and their molehills to us, but there are some mountains, but this section up here, Galilee, is the northern section of the Central Range. The average mountain is 2,800 feet. So we're in our minds, we're not talking mountains, but they are. They're relatively rugged mountains, not easily navigated. The highest mountain in that section is Mount Merion, Meiron. It's 4,000 feet. That's the highest in the section of Galilee. It's hard for us also to comprehend. The Sea of Galilee is 700 feet below sea level. So the entire lake where Peter, John, and the rest of them fished, all that is below sea level, which is kind of unusual for sure. We have the middle section. We come into here. Samaria is the middle section of the Central Range. It's called the hill country of Samaria. The city of Samaria itself was built on a hilltop to give it a vantage point. And some of these mountains and stuff, later map will identify the triangles are mountains that you'll recognize in the Bible. The circles are cities, and we'll get to that. But we're just looking at the landmass itself. In the Samaria section of the Central Range, Mount Gilboa is right at 1,700 feet. Mount Ebal, which is the Mount of Cursing that you'll find in the book of Deuteronomy, it runs just under 2,900 feet. So again, these aren't huge by any stretch by our the way we see it. Then Mount Gerizim, that's these two mountains, the Mount of Cursing, Mount of Blessing, and Joshua gathered Israel between those two mountains, and that's where they met in this area, and that's when they divided up the land. Then the southern section is Judah or Judea, and the mountains there range between 2,000 and 3,000 feet. They appear larger because the Dead Sea itself is almost 1,300 feet below sea level. Mount Moriah or Mount Zion is right by Jerusalem, and then the Mount Olivet or Mount of Olives is just on the eastern side of Jerusalem. And so most of the time Israel controlled basically the Central Range. That's where they, and remember, I'm thinking, I think it's the Assyrians, but they said, oh, their God is the God of the mountains. If we can get them down in the plain, then we have the upper hand. And God proved them wrong on that. But the idea came about is because they controlled that. One problem with controlling a mountainous, or to them, which, the hill country, whatever way you want to, it's more difficult to farm. The moisture level is higher, so that's good, but it still necessitates terracing or a whole lot of work to level a plot out. So because it was more difficult, the nations on either side didn't give that much effort to try to capture it. Then we come in to the Jordan Valley, which is east of the green and over to the orange. Jordan Valley is unique in that just about all of it is below sea level. The Jordan River begins 40 miles north of this little speck of water called Hula. It no longer exists because they figured out, man, there is some prime farmland, and so they basically dug canals and drained it dry. It was only, I believe it was, it averaged 5 feet deep to 10 feet deep before they drained it. But once they drained it, it was extremely fertile land. And so, but that's 40 miles north of here, in Mount Hermon is considered the beginning spot. There's actually four sources of water that make the Jordan River, and amazingly, the biggest one is a spring. A spring, a year-round spring feeds it. But we'll pick it up there next week. But it just, if we kind of, we'll get into the Eastern Plateau is the only other section, but understanding the geography of Israel helps in understanding the difficulties of travel, why certain areas always were fought over. In some areas, you don't ever hear any fighting because it's not worth fighting for. If you got rugged mountain peaks, for usefulness in their day, it wasn't very profitable to worry about. And so, but we'll pick it up there next week. All right, Rick.
let's stand again and sing 362. 362, no one ever cared for me like Jesus. 362. I would love to